Listen to some sentences from college lectures. Take notes as quickly as you can. 1.
The 19th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution gave women the right to vote, beginning with the elections of 1920.
2.
In a suspension bridge, there are two towers with one or more flexible cables firmly attached.
Activity 20. Activity 20. 1.
In his book, The Making of the President, Theodore White noted that the 1960 presidential debate was more like a press conference. According to White, Nixon proceeded as though he were engaged in a personal debate. In contrast, Kennedy spoke directly to the TV viewers. He estimated that Kennedy gained 2 million votes as a result.
2.
Paul Cézanne believed that all forms in nature were based on geometric shapes.
Activity 21. Listen to part of a lecture in a botany class.
The acacia is a genus of trees and shrubs of the mimosa family that originated in Australia and has long been used in building simple mud and stick structures there. The acacia is called a wattle in Australia, and the structures are made of wattle stuck together with daub, which is a kind of mud adobe. Now this is interesting. The acacia is related to the family of plants known as legumes. And I'm sure you remember that legumes include peas, beans, lentils, peanuts, and pods with bean-like seeds. Some acacias actually produce edible crops, but other acacia varieties are valued for the sticky resin called gum arabic or gum acacia, and that is used widely in medicines, foods, and perfumes. A few varieties are grown for the dark, dense wood, which is just excellent for making pianos, or for the bark that is very rich in tannin, a dark, acidic substance used to cure the hides of animals to make leather. Let's see. Nearly 500 species of acacia have been identified and categorized and proven capable of survival in hot and generally arid parts of the world. But only a dozen of the 300 Australian varieties seem to thrive in the southern United States. Most acacia imports are low, spreading trees, but of these only 3 flower. The Bailey acacia has fern-like silver leaves and small, fragrant flowers arranged in sort of rounded clusters. The silver wattle's similar to the Bailey acacia, but it grows about twice as high, and the Sydney golden wattle is bushy with broad flat leaves, and it's the golden wattle with the showy bright yellow blossoms. Okay, the black acacia is also called the blackwood. It has dark green foliage and the blossoms are rather ordinary, but besides being a popular ornamental tree, the black acacia is considered valuable for its dark wood, which is used in making furniture and musical instruments. I think I mentioned that acacias are used to make pianos. Well, a piano made of black acacia is highly prized in the musical world. Now, some of you may have heard that the acacia's unique custom of blossoming in February in the United States has something to do with its Australian origins. But that just isn't so. It isn't the date. It's the quality of light that makes the difference for the flowering cycle of a tree. As you know, in the southern hemisphere, the seasons are reversed, and February, which is wintertime in the United States, is summertime in Australia. Actually, however, the pale yellow blossoms appear in August in Australia. So, whether it grows in the northern or the southern hemisphere, the acacia blossoms in winter.
むずい。わりかしむずいね。
Activity 23. Listen to part of a lecture in a chemistry class.
Although the purpose and techniques were often magical, alchemy was, in many ways, the predecessor of the modern science of chemistry. The fundamental premise of alchemy derived from the best philosophical dogma and scientific practice of the time, and the majority of educated persons between 1400 and 1600 believed that alchemy had great merit. The earliest authentic works on European alchemy are those of the English monk Roger Bacon and the German philosopher St. Albertus Magnus. In their treatises, they maintained that gold was the perfect metal, and that inferior metals such as lead and mercury were removed by various degrees of imperfection from gold. They further asserted that these base metals could be transmuted to gold by blending them with a substance more perfect than gold. This elusive substance was referred to as the philosopher's stone. The process was called transmutation. Most of the early alchemists were artisans who were accustomed to keeping trade secrets and often resorted to cryptic terminology to record the progress of their work. The term sun was used for gold, moon for silver, and the 5 known planets for the base metals. This convention of substituting symbolic language attracted some mystical philosophers who compared the search for the perfect metal with the struggle of humankind for the perfection of the soul. The philosophers began to use the artisans' terms in the mystical literature that they produced. Thus, by the 14th century, alchemy had developed 2 distinct groups of practitioners, the laboratory alchemist and the literary alchemist. Both groups of alchemists continued to work throughout the history of alchemy, but of course, it was the literary alchemist who was more likely to produce a written record. Therefore, much of what is known about the science of alchemy is derived from philosophers rather than from the alchemists who labored in laboratories. Despite centuries of experimentation, laboratory alchemists failed to produce gold from other materials. However, they gained wide knowledge of chemical substances, discovered chemical properties, and invented many of the tools and techniques that are used by chemists today.
Many laboratory chemists earnestly devoted themselves to the scientific discovery of new compounds and reactions, and therefore must be considered the legitimate forefathers of modern chemistry. They continued to call themselves alchemists, but they were becoming true chemists.